Tell us a little bit about
Mhm.
what therapy is. I feel like there can be a lot of confusion. For example, if you know someone who's been injured and you're like, oh, they're going through physical therapy, they assume that therapy just means physical, that you're gonna get therapy on your body in some sort of way. So maybe you can help us relieve some of that confusion that some people might have in regards to therapy itself.
Yeah. When we say therapy, we mean, you're coming in, you're talking about some of the issues that impact your work life, right? And sometimes it is completely about work, but sometimes it's, family issues or financial stressors or even the physical disability and how it changes your identity. So it's just having another person who's non-judgmental, neutral, that you
Right.
can go to a safe space to talk about it. And sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who's outside of your family, outside of your friend circle, and say things that you can't say to them actually,
Right.
and be able to do it an hour. It's usually an hour each week, and you go on a regular basis, so you develop a trusting and safe relationship with this professional, and you're able to look at what is part of what you struggle with, but also down the road learning tools of like maybe some of the tools are already there, and it's for someone to say, you know what, I see you doing this already, how about we do more of this, or how about we try this, just different ideas, different tools to kind of add on to what you have.
So I've learned along the way that therapy can help you find balance. And when someone says it can help you find balance, what essentially is it that they're talking about as in balance?
I think balance means different things for different people. But I think, when someone says I'm out of balance, it's usually something is not quite fitting into their life. So I go with them and say, what are your values? What are things that are important to you? And usually when you go there, something is not aligned with their values, whether, maybe they identify as being the breadwinner of their family, and because of the disability, they can't work, right? It feels out of balance.
Right. That's a perfect example. I
And how do we work with that out of balance transition they have? Yeah.
Right. Well, what would be some of the positive things within therapy? I know a lot of people kind of like to know firsthand before they dive into any type of therapy, like what are they getting themselves into? So what would
hmm
be some of the positives in this?
A lot of people would say to me, you know what, I feel so a relief of that I'm not alone in this. Especially when we're talking about anxiety or depression, when you're actually able to say your thoughts to someone that maybe socially it's not, doesn't feel appropriate to say to someone at work or to your family
Right.
members. Maybe someone who's struggling with, you know what, I don't know how long I can work, and to be able to say that to someone who's neutral, it does something to help you kind of feel relief, but also kind of say, you know what, this is where I'm at right now, and from that place, like I was saying, like of acceptance, you can kind of say, well, what is my new life going to be like, and actually be able to envision the future. So to be able to talk about where you are right now, your pain right now, I think provides more space for future talk of like, okay, I'm not working. What is possible? Maybe I can go back to school, or I can find a different trade, or, changing my lifestyle, right?
Yeah, changing that mentality we might have sometimes that can bring us down or actually boost us up, right? There is a huge stigma
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about mental health. What
Mm.
do you see happening with the stigma? Like, essentially, why do people have the stigma in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I've been in the field for 14 years, and I think the hopeful thing is the stigma is changing. I think a lot of, Michael Phelps are, talking about seeking mental health. I'm really happy that's going on this direction, but I think some of it has been about culture or family, of like we keep this stuff inside, right? We don't share with people who are outsiders, and I think we're starting, especially the newer generations, are like dismantling that. Like, well, maybe this is actually a way to help my family by
Hmm.
sharing this, by learning new tools, by breaking the cycle. I hear people say, I want to break the cycle more now. And I feel like a lot of hope hearing that. But when I first started, it's almost like I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to hide that I'm going to therapy. I tell no one, to like, I'm actually telling people I'm going to therapy. So I think we're changing a lot culturally, but I think there's so much more to change. That mental health therapy is not for the crazy crazies or only for the rich. It's actually for people who want to make changes in their life, who want to be better, parents for their kids, or, better partners for their loved ones, that, they just want better.
They
So,
just want to make themselves a better person. And it's
yeah.
funny that you say that, because it's true. I feel like a lot of people, when we talk about mental health, when we talk about therapy and, oh, I'm seeing a therapist, it automatically assumes that there's something wrong with you, that you're not a normal person.
Yeah.
And it's just how you mentioned it. A lot of the people deal with depression, deal with anxiety. They don't voice what they're having in feelings inside of them, and essentially what happens is they explode. Something happens. It has like the snowball effect that triggers so many other things. And one of the quotes that you mentioned to me as we were preparing for this podcast was, good mental health is good health. Yeah. Essentially, what's the point of you having a fit body, you eat great, when your mental health is not aligned with the rest of your health? Yeah. And that's super important. And I'm so excited that we're actually talking about this specifically, because it comes in many forms. It affects people in many different ways. As we were speaking, it can have effect on those who, their upbringings, the way that, for example, in our culture, the Latinos, there's this thing that it's just, if you're a man, if you're a guy, you're not allowed to cry. You have to man it up and like, boys don't cry. And, it's brought to kids when they're growing up. So as they get older, as they develop into relationships and stuff, they automatically have it in their head that it's like, I have to be strong no matter what. I can't show being vulnerable or any type of sadness. It just makes me look like a weak person. And essentially, we need to break that cycle, because it's okay for a man to cry. It's okay for a guy to show emotion that's not necessarily always a strong emotion. And it's okay to be afraid, right? What is some of the biggest difficulties that you see with therapy?
Well, I think it's the stigma you're talking about, right? Like the feeling like you're crazy, or that you're culturally not who you are. Like, I'm not a man if I go to therapy, or I'm not, a Latina, or I'm not Asian American. And I think as we evolve as a culture, is to add the and, like, a man can cry and a man can be strong, right? And to show the boys, like, you can talk about your feelings and be completely strong and courageous. I think that's where we need to go. And I think to change the past of how we see therapy, but also to keep going. I think we're doing a good job now, but I think there's ways to go in dismantling. And I think the future generation, I work with a lot of children of different diverse groups, and they're exciting to me, because they'll say to their moms and their dads, like, it's okay to cry, mom and dad, like they are, they have languaging for their emotional life. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing, because I think that means change is happening. But we have a lot of ways to go, because I think the more mentally healthy we are as a culture, as people, I think we can do more in the work environment, but also in our family. So I think it's for everybody. It's like a revolution from the inside out,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's also another stigma relating to mental health, which is mental health for the rich. I can't afford it. It's super, going to a therapist is like, you're rich, you have the money, you can afford it. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when I start doing the work with them, they talk about trauma from the past, and I would ask them, have you addressed this when you were in your 20s or a teenager? And they said no. I started addressing this later in life, in my 30s, because of the stigma and because I'm poor, and now they're saying, you know what? Why didn't I address it earlier? Because now I'm a better father, I'm a better man. So people are seeing, like, wait a minute, if I address this even earlier, some of the decisions I make, right? I could have made different decisions. So I think people are seeing almost the other end of, I cannot afford not to do this, because I don't want it to go on to the next generation. I think that's where people really make that change of, like, it's only for the rich to, the cycle ends with me, even though I'm poor, even though I'm middle class, right? Like, because we can't afford this to continue, from generation to generation. I think when you talk about therapy, you have insights about the past. And then you think about your children, and you're saying to yourself, do I want my children to go through what I go through? And when people make that connection, it's like, no, it's enough pain,
And essentially that's what ends up happening, right? We bring the upbringings from our parents, whatever was brought onto us, whatever was taught to us.
Yeah.
And essentially the kids become us, you know, and
Mhm.
and you continue that pattern. And it's important to kind of focus and think, what change, or why am I the way I am? What am I connecting with my parents? What are they connecting to their parents? How am I bringing that onto my kids? And is that, if that's healthy or not? It's something that I think, it's a broader picture of knowing you have the option to change the life of those after you. And that's an
Yeah.
amazing decision someone
Hmm.
can make. And
Yeah.
that's impactful. So it's going to go on for so long, for so many generations, that in the long run, if you see the price and the worthiness of it, it's all worth everything you pay. And there's so many programs and so many therapists that help in so many ways. So you can't, I can't believe it to be super expensive. There has to be a medium. There has to be help.
Hmm.
Just like there's for rents, you know, there's obviously mansions, there's obviously
Yeah.
condos, there are houses,
Yeah.
and there's also the help for those that, you know, would definitely need it. So I'm assuming it's the same with in the therapist world.
Yeah, so Medi-Cal covers therapy, for example. I think everyone should know about that. They cover therapy for adults, they cover therapy for children, and the more people know and kind of say that, like, you know, it seems like you're struggling. Why don't you use your Medi-Cal to go for therapy, or your insurance to cover therapy? There's a lot of therapists who take those, but people don't know about it because they think it's only out of pocket, right? It's one of these
Right.
stereotypes that people don't know about. Yeah.
They see it as it's just like you said, you have to pay out of pocket. It's not necessarily an essential. It's something that you want. It's a luxury you can have. It's
Yeah.
probably one of the best luxuries someone can get. That's for
Yeah.
sure. I've personally had a couple of therapists in my life at difficult stages of life, and being a
Mhm.
mother, and just in general, growing, getting older,
Yeah.
you know, things change. And I seek therapy, and I am beyond grateful for being able to have the opportunity and the platform to do it now, virtually. You know, there's so many apps,
Yeah.
there's just so many ways where you can actually interact with your therapist via from the comfort of your home,
Yeah.
you know, from your bedroom. And
Yeah.
it's been an amazing experience. Let's talk a little bit about how therapy or mental health relates to those who were injured at work, were injured in an accident, because obviously we at Pacific Workers dive into
Mhm.
heavily with the work related injuries, and your husband happens to be one of our top attorneys for the law firm. So how can someone going through an injury at work benefit from getting therapy? Or when would someone seek it? Why would someone seek it?
Mhm. I find that, like, sometimes when you look at physical injury, the mental health usually comes after. Like, it's almost like you can't tease it apart, right? You know, if you're having a lot of chronic pain, there's a lot of anxiety, like, is this going to get better? Or depression, even, like, I can't get up, or this unbearable. So I think getting kind of hand in hand, if you're going to a physical therapist, go to a mental health therapist. Talk about all the feelings that come up with not having a body that you're used to, that, you know, you can go to work with and kind of make all this stuff happen, right? And especially people who are breadwinners to their family, you know, men and women, right? Like, what happens the day comes and, you know, you can't do what you used to do. You know, there's a lot of thoughts for people, you know, and I think the pain that is involved, mental pain, is where I think mental health therapists can come in and support them. So you don't have to go through the pain alone. I think that's a key word. Like, to go through everything alone is huge, you know, because that's a huge life change. And it's the one that has a high stressor. Like, where, how am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to feed my family? What's going to happen? And those things, I don't think people have to go through it by themselves. They can talk to someone non-judgmentally and be able to say, you know what, I don't know where we're going. I have anxiety about this. And I think the more you can say that, the anxiety actually goes down. So then it also impacts your physical health. You know, maybe you can kind of recover once some of those thoughts come down. But I think it's important to do hand in hand, because it's different parts of you that are affected. And it's huge. And to do it alone, to white knuckle through it alone, is asking almost too much of anyone.
Right. In a
You
personal
know?
note, my father was injured at work, and it completely shattered his hand to the point where his hand now can't be extended as anyone else's hand
Mm-hmm.
can. It's actually at this position, and the grip, he lost everything. When he was going through his therapy for physical therapy for his hand, through the whole workers' comp claim, it was never brought to his attention that, like you mentioned, they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Years later, and I'm talking about 15 plus years later, my dad till this day constantly says, I'm broken. I'm no longer whole. I'm worth half of what I was because
Yeah.
I have this injury. And it's what is embedded in his head, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
that had he had went to therapy, because he is the type of person that he's like, no, I don't need therapy. Therapy's for
Mm-hmm.
crazies.
Mm-hmm.
Had he went and seek that type of information or that type of health, and changed it to a good health,
Yeah.
I definitely think he would consider him a lucky man. He would be in a different state where he is now,
Mm-hmm.
being an older person. And essentially time hits you, it's like you can't do the things you could do when you were younger. You don't have the same
Yeah.
type of energy, and having that injury makes him feel less than.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of grief in that, right, for your dad, of like, I used to be this kind of person and now I'm this kind of person. And wouldn't it be amazing if he had someone with him saying, well, can I be welcome in your grief with you? So you're not going through this by yourself. Because I know it's probably hard for you to tell your daughter or to tell your wife, but I'm here and I can hear that there's pain involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what would it be like for us to even go back to the initial injury? Like what happened that day, right? And I think for people to be able to talk about that, it does something for them to feel like they're in a different place, or even make meaning. Like you said, the meaning I make for my injury is that A, B, and C, right? But I think when you don't have that space, you can kind of be stuck in that time where you were broken, and I think
Right.
that's the thing about therapy. It helps you move along a little bit more.
Right. So let's talk about, I know you said something along the lines that you utilize somatic and the psychodynamic. Explain what those types of therapies are.
Okay. Well, psychodynamic is how you see talk therapy, like looking at someone's past or how they're raised and their family values and how they impact them today. It's like a short way of saying it. And a lot of psychotherapy talks about that, or talk therapy. Somatic, I like because culturally, as Asian American, a lot of Asian Americans, instead of saying I'm anxious, might say my back hurts. It's kind of like a code word for I'm stressed out, but culturally, people don't have the language per se to talk about that. So then I would go into their body experience, especially if we're talking about your dad, like let's go to where your hand, let's see what that's like. And for him to actually be able to say, yeah, I still feel the sensation, or, connecting it to the issues he has today, using the body experience.
Right. How
In a way, it's another way of tapping into someone who has a different culture.
how much has the new EMDR evolved and has been used more so now with everything that's been going on?
EMDR is amazing trauma work. So part of my training is trauma work. People who've gone through, trauma, whether it's physical or just trauma could be in a lot of different ways. Like 9/11 could be trauma, or the war, right?
Yeah.
So
COVID.
yeah,
COVID. We're all living COVID right
COVID-19.
now.
Yeah. So EMDR is amazing where it's more about the memories. So like I would ask, once we have a safe relationship, to say, is there a memory you want to work with? And you would pull up a memory from the past. And we would use the EMDR to do the eye shifting or tapping, so that we can talk about a memory and help you go through it with less sensitivity, if that makes sense. A lot of trauma, when you talk about it, is at a 10, the intensity of it. And the work EMDR is to kind of lower it down to maybe a 6 or even a 5. So then you can have more insights about it. So it's not just a reactive, like when I think about that memory, I'm in shock to like, well, now I think about the memory and, I still don't feel good about what happened, but I can manage it. So it's about helping people manage it. But it's through using the technique, to talk about the memory, to go through it with the client. It's almost like being a guide with them. So I'm kind of going back in time. I'm sitting with them in time and it's just one memory at a time, so it's not overwhelming. And then sometimes people will say, I think about the same memory and I don't cry every time I talk about it. So it's a pretty amazing work. I've done it myself as a client, when I was younger, and I find it to be pretty like a game changer. So
impactful, definitely.
yeah.
My God, it's exciting just diving into this type of information.
Yeah.
Maggie, tell us a little bit about what happens with therapy in the long run. Say someone seeks therapy for 1 year, 2 years. Do these tools that get taught to oneself, can you bring those on for the rest? Do you have to have a therapist for years and years and years? How does that work?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I always want to say that my job, if I do it right, is to get myself out of work. If for example, I give all the tools and I work with the clients and they practice the tools and they start talking like me, I'm thinking, okay, I'm done, and sometimes I work with children who start talking like therapists and I'm like, my work is done, it's kind of, that's a way of like saying, eventually people start kind of learning these tools and it becomes like second nature, like how like you ride your bicycle because you practice it so much, and those muscles are activated, what to do. It doesn't mean you always do it, but then like you have choices, sometimes you don't want to brush your teeth, but like it's the right thing to do. So I think it's about giving the tools, the insight, and saying to people, you have choices. You can make those choices, and you can also make bad choices if you want to, but like at least that you're actually in control for the most part. So yeah, the question to what you're saying is, yes, if therapy, if it works for the person, shouldn't last forever. It should last for only a period of time, and they learn more tools. And some people want to continue longer because they have different life changes. But some people want to do 6 months and they learn the tool and they're on their own, But it's a very special relationship you have with this person because you go really deep about your life and you feel that safety with them,
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like your second pair of eyes. It's almost like your best friend, essentially, which is someone you can confide in. And I've seen it when you let go of that therapist, it's almost like you lose a best friend. You lose that person you can tell everything to and be transparent with without being judged, without being feeling like that person's going to see you differently or whatnot, So
yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So it's important if you guys are listening, tuning into us right now, as we're diving into mental health therapy and how it relates to so many aspects of our life, and definitely also jumps into those who go through trauma. We've seen clients come in with us here at Pacific Workers where they have to get a limb amputated, whether it's fingers, hands, and it's a life-changing traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And digging deep into also getting therapy is definitely a positive, and it's definitely a must, I think. And luckily we learned today, thank you, Maggie, that Medi-Cal covers some of it. What are some other programs that we can find out about that maybe we don't even know exist?
Yeah, I mean, Medi-Cal covers it. Insurance covers it. There are nonprofits out there, depending if someone is a victim of crime or in a domestic violence situation, they cover it. There's also, these hotlines, crisis hotline that are 24/7. I tell people about a lot of these resources because they're available. Like if you're in crisis, maybe you don't have a therapist, you can call this 24/7 hours anytime. If you're in a domestic violence situation, there's a hotline 24/7. If you're a parent that's stressed out, there's a number for you too. I mean, there's starting to be a lot of hotlines out there that can also lead you to therapists, and they have also their resources. But if you have Medi-Cal especially, they cover past a year worth of services. So it's pretty substantial what you can get with Medi-Cal.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Well, Maggie, is there something else you would like to share with us that you haven't said already?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. I just want to say back to what you said, mental health is health. I mean, without mental health, not much can be done, and your quality of life is limited when your mental health is not in good shape. So, there's a lot of people out there willing to help. Is, for me, it's a gift for me to like help other people. It's something I enjoy doing. And I can say that about other therapists. They want to support people through their life changes, and through trauma in their life. And you don't have to go through pain by yourself. And it also helps your family when you get support. And it's a sign of courage. So.
Definitely. Totally agree with you. Well, Maggie, it's been a pleasure to
Yeah,
have these
thank
type
you.
of discussions. We've learned a lot, and you've kind of brought in, I guess, the image of what mental health is. And yes, guys, it is not for the crazies. It's not for people that are sick in the head, or, as you know, so many things have been mentioned when it comes to mental health. It's actually healing the person you are and making you a better person. And what more can we ask for, right? At this,
Yeah.
and especially with COVID, I wouldn't be surprised that all these therapists are going to start getting even more clients, because I think we all got hit by COVID. Our
Yeah.
life changed, and
Yeah.
it's going to continue to change. And we need to also learn to adapt to the new world, because I don't think we're just going to jump into, hey, let's go back to our normal life and what we used to make of it. Now we have to
Yeah.
take precautions. And how has this affected you in your family? Because I know you have little ones. How
Yeah.
has this affected you?
Well, it is stressful, like, cause, there's a loss for the kids. I wanted the boys to be able to go to school. School's a huge part of being young, and we know, right? Like, your friends mean a lot to you. So I think there's grief involved of like, oh, the boys have to stay home with us. I mean, we're lucky, we're the fortunate ones that get to stay home, but they're losing out on, my son is finishing 5th grade. So he's losing out on walking with his classmates before middle school, right? So there's things that we know they're losing out on, but we're trying to keep the normalcy, as much as we can. But like you said, where we're going, we don't know where we're going, but mental health therapy is like up and up, because people are calling, like you're saying, because people are feeling the isolation, they're feeling the anxiety, and it's a good time to kind of support each other, yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing this information. We do appreciate everything you've spoken with us today.
Thank you,
And is
Carmen.
there
Yeah.
somewhere people can reach out to you and try and get connected with you? Can you share that social media maybe, or where we can get a hold of therapists?
Yeah. Oh, therapist, you mean?
Or yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone wants to
So,
connect.
yeah. So, you can find me on Psychology Today. You can find any therapist on Psychology Today. It's a website, and you can search for us. My information's there, my phone number, my website. And yeah, so you can reach out to me. I'm pretty full right now, Carmen, but there are going to be other therapists also available. And you can actually look at our pictures and see how we do the work, and get to a sense of if there's a good fit between me and you.
Definitely. Maggie, thank you so much for your time. I
Thank
hope
you,
you enjoy
Carmen.
the weekend. And thank you guys for joining us.